What if I told you there's a fundamental law of the universe that's been deliberately hidden from you since childhood? A law so powerful that once you understand it, you'll never see reality the same way again. Right now, you're living your life based on lies. The education system, the media, even science itself has been teaching you that you're powerless, that everything happens by chance, and that you must always look outside yourself for answers. But there's something they don't want you to know. I'm about to reveal to you the most suppressed truth in human history. This isn't some New Age nonsense or conspiracy theory. This is about a law that's been recognized by every ancient civilization, every great philosopher, and every breakthrough scientist throughout history. Yet somehow, it's been systematically erased from modern education. By the end of this video, you'll understand why they've hidden this from you, how it actually works, and most importantly, how you can use it to completely transform your life. But first, let me show you just how deep this deception goes. Picture this. You're 5 years old, walking into your first classroom. The teacher stands at the front, pointing to a blackboard, telling you exactly what to think, when to think it, and how to think it. From that moment on, you're being programmed. Sit down, be quiet, don't question, memorize these facts. The authority knows best. This isn't education. This is indoctrination. And it's the first step in convincing you that you have no power over your own reality. But let me take you deeper into this rabbit hole. The moment you stepped into that classroom, you entered what I call the authority matrix, a carefully constructed system designed to make you believe that truth comes from outside yourself. Your natural curiosity, your innate knowing, your connection to universal wisdom, all of it gets systematically dismantled and replaced with external dependency. Think about how they structured your entire educational experience. Every day for 12 to 16 years, you sat in rows, facing forward, listening to someone else tell you what reality is. You weren't encouraged to discover truth for yourself. You were told to accept what was given to you without question. They taught you that there are experts who know better than you do, that you need credentials to have valid opinions, that your personal experience doesn't matter unless it's validated by institutional authority. They convinced you that you're just a biological machine, randomly evolved, with no greater purpose or power beyond survival and reproduction. Let me share something that happened to me when I was 8 years old. I was sitting in my backyard, looking up at the stars, and I suddenly felt this overwhelming sense that I was connected to everything I could see. It wasn't a thought, it was a knowing. I felt like the entire universe was alive, conscious, and that I was part of some incredible cosmic intelligence. I ran inside, excited to share this experience with my parents. My father, a rational man who worked in accounting, looked at me with that mixture of amusement and concern that adults reserve for children who say things that don't fit the accepted worldview. "That's just your imagination," he said. "Stars are just burning gas millions of miles away. They can't affect you, and you certainly can't affect them." That was the moment I learned to doubt my own direct experience. That was the moment I learned that what I knew to be true in my heart was somehow less valid than what other people told me was true in my head. And this is exactly what happens to every child in our society. We come into this world with an intuitive understanding of how reality works, and then we're systematically taught to forget it. Think about what they actually taught you in school about how the world works. They told you that you're just a random accident, floating on a rock in space, at the mercy of forces beyond your control. They told you that consciousness is just a byproduct of brain chemistry, that thoughts are meaningless electrical impulses, and that you're separate from everything around you. They taught you that success comes from hard work and luck, that you need to compete with others for limited resources, that suffering is inevitable, that aging and death are unavoidable, that you're a victim of your genetics, your circumstances, your past. But here's what they didn't tell you. Every single one of these facts is not only wrong, It's deliberately designed to keep you powerless. The entire educational system is built on what I call the scarcity operating system. The belief that there isn't enough to go around, that you have to fight for your place in the world, that power is something that other people have and you don't. This operating system serves the interests of those who benefit from your disempowerment. If you believe you're powerless, you'll look to external authorities for solutions. If you believe resources are scarce, you'll compete instead of collaborate. If you believe you're separate from others, you won't realize that their suffering is connected to your suffering, and their liberation is connected to your liberation. The genius of this system is that it's self-reinforcing. When you believe you're powerless, you act powerless, which creates powerless results, which confirms your belief that you're powerless. It's a perfect prison because you become your own jailer. But what if I told you that this entire worldview is not only false, but it's actually the opposite of how reality works? Let me take you on a journey back in time to civilizations that understood something we've forgotten. These weren't primitive people living in ignorance. They were sophisticated cultures with technologies and knowledge that we're only beginning to rediscover. Start with ancient Egypt 5,000 years ago. When you look at the pyramids, you're not just seeing impressive architecture. You're seeing evidence of a civilization that understood the fundamental forces of creation. The Great Pyramid isn't just a tomb. It's a consciousness amplifier built with precise mathematical relationships that mirror the structure of reality itself. The Egyptians knew about something they called Maat, not just a goddess, but a principle that governed how thoughts, words, and actions create reality. They understood that consciousness isn't produced by the brain, but that the brain is a receiver, like a radio tuning into the frequency of awareness. Their hieroglyphs weren't just pictures. They were symbols designed to activate specific frequencies in consciousness. Their temples weren't just buildings. They were machines for altering states of awareness. Their rituals weren't just ceremonies. They were technologies for working with the creative forces of the universe. The Egyptian mystery schools taught something called the science of the word, the understanding that sound, vibration, and intention could literally restructure reality at the fundamental level. They knew that spoken and written language wasn't just communication, it was creation. But the knowledge goes even deeper. The Egyptians understood that time isn't linear, that past, present, and future exist simultaneously, and that consciousness can access information from any point in time. They'd practiced what they called traveling in the divine boat, moving their awareness through different dimensions of reality. Move forward to ancient Greece, and you'll find that the greatest philosophers weren't just thinking about reality, they were describing how it actually works. Plato's allegory of the cave wasn't just philosophy. It was a blueprint for understanding how consciousness creates the illusion of physical reality. Plato taught that what we experience as the material world is actually shadows cast by higher dimensional realities. He understood that ideas aren't just thoughts, they're the fundamental building blocks of existence. He called them forms, perfect templates from which all physical manifestations emerge. Aristotle, despite being remembered as a materialist, actually taught that consciousness is the unmoved mover, the source of all change and creation in the universe. He understood that mind and matter aren't separate things, but different aspects of the same underlying reality. The Greek mystery schools, particularly the Eleusinian mysteries, taught initiates how to access what they called divine consciousness, states of awareness where the individual ego dissolves and you experience yourself as the universe itself. These weren't drug-induced hallucinations. They were systematic methods for accessing higher dimensions of reality. Pythagoras, famous for his mathematical theorem, was actually a mystic who understood that numbers aren't just abstract concepts. They're the language of creation itself. He taught that reality is fundamentally mathematical, that consciousness operates according to precise numerical relationships, and that by understanding these relationships, you could literally reprogram reality. The Pythagorean school wasn't just teaching mathematics, They were teaching consciousness technology. They understood that certain geometric patterns, certain numerical sequences, certain harmonic relationships could activate dormant potentials in human awareness. Travel to ancient India, and you'll discover the most sophisticated understanding of consciousness ever developed. The Vedas, written over 3,000 years ago, described the universe as consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. They called it Brahman, the unified field of awareness from which all things emerge and to which all things return. But the Vedic understanding goes far beyond philosophy. They developed an entire science of consciousness called yoga, not just physical postures, but a comprehensive system for understanding and working with the different levels of reality. They mapped human consciousness with extraordinary precision. They identified 7 main energy centers in the body, called chakras, each corresponding to different aspects of awareness and different dimensions of reality. They understood that consciousness operates through multiple bodies, not just the physical body, but subtle energy bodies that exist in higher dimensions. The ancient yogis practiced what they called samadhi, states of consciousness where individual awareness merges with universal awareness. In these states, they could access information from anywhere in the universe, influence events at a distance, and even transcend the limitations of physical existence. They developed techniques like pranayama, working with life force energy through breath. They understood that consciousness and energy are inseparable, that by working with energy, you could influence consciousness, and by working with consciousness, you could direct energy. The Vedic texts describe technologies that sound like science fiction, flying vehicles powered by consciousness, weapons that operated through focused intention, communication systems that worked across vast distances without physical technology. Were these literal descriptions or metaphors? The more we understand about consciousness, the more it seems they might have been literal. Move to ancient China, and you'll find a civilization built on the understanding of what they called the Tao, the underlying principle that governs all existence. The Tao isn't a thing. It's the source of all things, the creative principle that responds to human intention and awareness. The Chinese developed an entire medical system based on the understanding that consciousness and energy flow through specific pathways in the body. Acupuncture isn't just inserting needles. It's redirecting the flow of consciousness through the human energy system. They created martial arts that weren't just physical combat, but ways of aligning with the fundamental forces of creation. Tai Chi and Qigong are actually moving meditations designed to harmonize individual consciousness with universal consciousness. The I Ching, often dismissed as fortune-telling, is actually a sophisticated system for understanding how consciousness creates patterns in reality. It's a map of how awareness and possibility interact to create experience. Even ancient civilizations in the Americas understood these principles. The Maya weren't just astronomers. They were consciousness researchers who understood that human awareness is intimately connected to cosmic cycles. Their calendars weren't just tracking time. They were mapping the evolution of consciousness itself. The Inca understood that sacred sites weren't just religious locations. They were consciousness amplifiers where the barrier between dimensions became thin. They built their temples at specific geographical locations that enhanced human awareness and facilitated contact with higher intelligences. Native American traditions speak of the Great Spirit, not a separate deity, but the consciousness that lives within all things. They understood that humans are not separate from nature, but expressions of the same intelligence that creates trees, rivers, animals, and stars. All of these civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, independently discovered the same fundamental truth. Consciousness is the creative force of the universe, and human beings are conscious creators with the ability to shape reality through awareness, intention, and alignment with universal principles. But then something changed. Around the 17th century, a new worldview emerged that completely flipped our understanding of reality upside down. The year was 1637, and Rene Descartes was about to make a deal that would change the course of human history. Facing pressure from the Catholic Church, which saw his scientific investigations as a threat to religious authority, Descartes proposed a compromise that seemed reasonable at the time, but would have devastating consequences for human consciousness. He suggested dividing reality into two separate domains, mind and matter. The Church could have dominion over matters of consciousness, soul, and spirit, while science would study the physical, material world. This created what philosophers call the Cartesian split, the artificial separation of consciousness from the physical universe. Suddenly, consciousness was no longer part of science. It was relegated to religion, philosophy, and eventually superstition. The universe became a machine, humans became biological robots, and thoughts became meaningless chemical reactions with no power to influence the physical world. But here's what most people don't realize. This wasn't a natural evolution of human understanding. It was a strategic move designed to consolidate power in the hands of institutional authorities. Before Descartes, natural philosophers understood that consciousness and matter were intimately connected. They studied alchemy, which wasn't just primitive chemistry. It was the science of how consciousness transforms matter. They practiced what they called natural magic, working with the hidden forces of nature through focused intention and awareness. But the Church and emerging state powers had a problem. If people understood that they were conscious creators with the ability to transform reality, they would be much harder to control. How do you maintain authority over people who know they're gods? The solution was brilliant in its simplicity. Convince people that consciousness is powerless, that the physical world operates according to mechanical laws that can't be influenced by thought or intention, and that human beings are essentially biological machines with no special status in the universe. This required a complete rewriting of science, philosophy, and eventually education. The new worldview needed to appear logical, rational, and evidence-based, even though it was actually based on an arbitrary philosophical assumption, the assumption that consciousness and matter are separate. Isaac Newton, the father of classical physics, became the unwitting figurehead of this new mechanical worldview, even though his private studies revealed a very different understanding of reality. Newton spent more time studying alchemy, mysticism, and biblical prophecy than he did on physics. He believed in what he called the active principle, a conscious intelligence that governs the universe. In his private writings, Newton described space as the sensorium of God, the medium through which divine consciousness perceives and interacts with creation. He understood that the mathematical laws he discovered weren't separate from consciousness, but expressions of how universal intelligence operates. But the scientific establishment suppressed these aspects of Newton's work. They presented only his mechanical discoveries, creating the impression that he saw the universe as a giant clockwork machine operating without consciousness or purpose. The same pattern repeated with every great scientist. They would discover something that revealed the role of consciousness in physical reality, but only the materialist interpretations of their work would be promoted by the scientific establishment. Take Charles Darwin, for example. His theory of evolution is presented as proof that life emerged randomly, without intelligence or purpose. But Darwin himself wrote extensively about what he called the principle of beauty, the tendency of nature to create forms that are not just functional, but aesthetically pleasing. He wondered why natural selection would produce beauty if survival was the only driving force. Darwin also wrote about the moral sense that exists in humans and other animals, a sense of right and wrong that seems to transcend survival instincts. He recognized that consciousness appeared to be guiding evolution toward greater complexity, greater beauty, and greater moral development. But these aspects of Darwin's thinking were downplayed or ignored. Only the mechanical, random aspects of his theory were emphasized, creating the impression that life is meaningless, purposeless, and driven only by the struggle for survival. This pattern continues today. Any scientific discovery that suggests consciousness plays a role in physical reality is either suppressed, ridiculed, or reinterpreted to fit the materialist worldview. The result is what I call scientific materialism. Not real science, but a belief system disguised as science. Real science is about exploring the unknown, testing hypotheses, and following evidence wherever it leads. Scientific materialism is about defending a predetermined conclusion, that consciousness is powerless and reality is meaningless. This belief system serves the interests of existing power structures perfectly. If people believe they're powerless biological machines, they'll look to external authorities for solutions to their problems. If they believe consciousness is just brain chemistry, they won't realize their own creative potential. If they believe the universe is meaningless, they won't search for higher purpose or spiritual development. The educational system became the primary delivery mechanism for this disempowering worldview. Children who entered school with natural curiosity and innate spiritual awareness would leave 12 to 16 years later convinced that they were isolated biological entities in a hostile, meaningless universe. But here's what's fascinating. Even as the materialist worldview was being constructed, the greatest scientists kept discovering evidence that consciousness and reality are intimately connected. They just couldn't admit it publicly without risking their careers and reputations. In 1900, a German physicist named Max Planck made a discovery that would eventually shatter the foundations of scientific materialism, though it would take decades for anyone to realize it. Planck was studying what seemed like a simple problem. Why do hot objects glow? According to classical physics, a heated object should emit energy continuously across all frequencies. But when Planck measured actual hot objects, he found something impossible. Energy was being emitted in discrete packets, which he called quanta. This discovery implied that energy, the fundamental substance of the physical universe, wasn't continuous like a flowing river, but discrete like individual droplets. Reality wasn't smooth and predictable, but chunky and uncertain at the smallest scales. But the real shock came later, when other physicists began to explore the implications of Planck's discovery. What they found would have seemed like pure fantasy to earlier generations of scientists. In 1909, Jeffrey Taylor conducted an experiment that became known as the double-slit experiment. He wanted to understand the fundamental nature of light, so he created a setup where individual photons, single particles of light, would be fired one at a time through a barrier with two parallel slits. According to classical physics, each photon should go through one slit or the other, creating two distinct impact patterns on a screen behind the barrier. But that's not what happened. Instead, the photons created an interference pattern, a series of light and dark bands that could only be explained if each individual photon somehow went through both slits simultaneously and interfered with itself. This was impossible according to classical physics. A particle can't be in two places at once. But the evidence was undeniable. At the quantum level, reality behaves in ways that completely violate our everyday understanding of how the world works. But the experiment held an even bigger surprise. When Taylor tried to observe which slit each photon went through by placing detectors at each slit, the interference pattern disappeared. The moment observation occurred, the photons started behaving like classical particles, going through one slit or the other. The act of observation literally changed the behavior of physical reality. This became known as the observer effect, and it implied something that materialist science had categorically denied. Consciousness plays a fundamental role in determining the nature of physical reality. Werner Heisenberg, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, was forced to confront this uncomfortable truth. "What we observe is not nature itself," he wrote, "but nature exposed to our method of questioning." In other words, there is no objective reality independent of consciousness. The universe doesn't exist out there, waiting to be discovered. Reality is a collaborative creation between consciousness and possibility. Niels Bohr, another quantum pioneer, Put it even more directly, anyone who is not shocked by quantum theory has not understood it. Max Planck himself, the man whose discovery started the quantum revolution, eventually came to a startling conclusion. I regard consciousness as fundamental. I regard matter as derivative from consciousness. We cannot get behind consciousness. But perhaps the most profound insight came from physicist John Wheeler, who coined the term participatory universe. Wheeler realized that quantum mechanics wasn't just describing the behavior of subatomic particles. It was revealing the fundamental nature of reality itself. According to Wheeler, the universe doesn't exist as a fixed, predetermined structure. Instead, it exists as a field of possibilities that becomes actualized through the process of observation. Past, present, and future are not fixed realities, but potential experiences that become real through conscious interaction. Wheeler proposed that consciousness doesn't just observe reality. It literally brings reality into existence through the act of observation. He called this the it from bit hypothesis, the idea that all physical phenomena emerge from information, and information emerges from conscious questioning. But the quantum revelations didn't stop there. In the 1960s, physicist John Bell proved mathematically that reality cannot be both local and real in the classical sense. His theorem, known as Bell's inequality, demonstrated that particles that have interacted remain mysteriously connected, regardless of the distance separating them. When one particle in an entangled pair is measured, the other particle instantly responds, even if it's on the opposite side of the galaxy. Einstein called this spooky action at a distance and refused to accept it, insisting that there must be hidden variables that could explain the phenomenon without violating the speed of light. But subsequent experiments have consistently confirmed Bell's predictions. Quantum entanglement is real, and it suggests that the universe is not made up of separate, isolated parts, but is instead a unified, interconnected whole where every part influences every other part instantaneously. This has profound implications for consciousness. If all matter is quantum entangled at the fundamental level, then consciousness, which interacts with matter through the quantum field, may be naturally connected to everything in the universe. The implications became even more staggering with the development of quantum field theory. Physicists discovered that what we call empty space isn't empty at all. It's filled with what they call the zero-point field, a seething ocean of virtual particles constantly popping into and out of existence. This field contains more energy than all the matter in the visible universe. It's not just the background against which reality plays out. It's the source from which reality emerges. Some physicists began to wonder, could consciousness be a fundamental property of this quantum field? Could awareness be the mechanism through which possibilities collapse into actualized experiences? These questions led to even more radical discoveries. Physicist Henry Stapp demonstrated that consciousness cannot be reduced to brain processes, because consciousness is required to collapse quantum possibilities into definite outcomes. In other words, consciousness cannot be explained by physical processes, because physical processes require consciousness to exist. Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff proposed that consciousness operates through quantum processes in microscopic structures within brain cells called microtubules. According to their theory, the brain doesn't generate consciousness. It processes consciousness through quantum computation. But perhaps the most revolutionary insight came from physicist David Bohm, who realized that quantum mechanics was revealing something that mystics and ancient wisdom traditions had always known. Reality is fundamentally holographic. According to Bohm's interpretation, what we experience as separate objects in space and time are actually projections of a deeper, implicate order where everything is interconnected. The entire universe is enfolded within every part, and every part contains the whole. This holographic principle means that consciousness isn't produced by the brain. Consciousness is the fundamental field within which brains, bodies, and entire universes arise as temporary patterns of experience. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Despite overwhelming evidence that consciousness plays a fundamental role in physical reality, the scientific establishment has worked systematically to suppress, ridicule, and ignore these discoveries. Let me tell you about Dr. Dean Radin, one of the world's leading researchers on consciousness and its effects on physical reality. For over 30 years, he's conducted rigorous scientific experiments that would revolutionize our understanding of human potential if they were given proper attention. Radin has demonstrated that human intention can influence random number generators with statistical significance that would be considered overwhelming proof in any other field of science. He's shown that people can sense being stared at from behind, that thoughts can influence the behavior of electronic devices, and that consciousness operates beyond the boundaries of space and time. His experiments on precognition, the ability to sense future events, have been replicated in laboratories around the world with results so consistent that they meet the highest standards of scientific evidence. The statistical odds against these results occurring by chance are literally trillions to one. But when Radin presents his findings at scientific conferences, he's met with ridicule, hostility, and systematic attempts to discredit his work. His papers are rejected by mainstream journals, not because of methodological flaws, but because the results contradict the materialist worldview that dominates academic science. The same treatment was given to Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, a Cambridge-trained biochemist who dared to propose that nature has memory. Sheldrake's theory of morphic resonance suggests that when members of a species learn something new, it becomes easier for other members of the same species to learn the same thing, even when they're separated by vast distances. This would explain why scientific discoveries often emerge simultaneously in different parts of the world, why cultural innovations spread faster than communication technology should allow, and why certain types of learning accelerate across entire populations without direct contact. Sheldrake's theory is supported by extensive experimental evidence, but it implies that consciousness operates through fields that transcend individual brains. This is unacceptable to the materialist establishment, so Sheldrake has been systematically marginalized. His TED Talk was censored, and his books are attacked rather than properly examined. Dr. Gary Schwartz at the University of Arizona has conducted extensive research on consciousness survival after bodily death. His experiments with mediums have produced evidence that consciousness continues to exist and can communicate information after the physical body dies. The evidential value of his research would be considered conclusive in any field except consciousness studies. But Schwartz's work is ignored by mainstream science because it implies that consciousness is not produced by the brain, a conclusion that would require a complete revision of our understanding of human nature and reality itself. The Institute of Noetic Sciences, founded by astronaut Edgar Mitchell after his consciousness-expanding experience in space, has funded hundreds of studies on consciousness research. They've documented telepathy, remote viewing, psychokinesis, healing at a distance, and numerous other phenomena that demonstrate the creative power of consciousness. But these studies are excluded from mainstream scientific education, dismissed in popular science media, and actively suppressed by funding agencies that control research priorities. The pattern is consistent and systematic. Any research that demonstrates the power of consciousness is marginalized, underfunded, and excluded from mainstream discourse, regardless of its scientific rigor or evidential support. Why? Because if people understood that consciousness creates reality, if they realized that their thoughts and intentions have measurable effects on the physical world, if they knew that they're interconnected with everything in the universe through consciousness fields, the entire power structure of modern society would collapse. Governments depend on people believing they're powerless victims who need external authorities to solve their problems. Corporations depend on people believing they're separate individuals who must compete for limited resources. Medical institutions depend on people believing their bodies are mechanical systems that can only be healed by external interventions. Religious institutions depend on people believing that divine power exists outside themselves and can only be accessed through institutional intermediaries. Educational institutions depend on people believing that truth comes from external authorities rather than from direct experience and inner knowing. The entire social, economic, and political structure of modern civilization is built on the assumption that consciousness is powerless and that individuals are separate, isolated entities with no ability to influence reality through awareness and intention. If people understood the true nature of consciousness, they would realize that they don't need external authorities to solve their problems. They would understand that they're interconnected with all life, and that their individual transformation contributes to collective transformation. They would know that their thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are creative forces that literally shape their experience of reality. This is why the suppression of consciousness research isn't accidental or incidental. It's systematic and deliberate. The power structure of modern society depends on keeping people ignorant of their true nature as conscious creators. But the suppression is becoming harder to maintain. The evidence is too overwhelming. The implications are too profound. And more people are having direct experiences that contradict the materialist worldview. So what is this universal law that's been hidden from you? What is the fundamental principle that ancient civilizations knew, that quantum physics has rediscovered, and that the power structure works so hard to suppress? Here it is, in its simplest form. Consciousness is the fundamental fabric of reality, and your thoughts, emotions, and beliefs are the tools through which you shape your experience of existence. This isn't metaphor. This isn't philosophy. This is literally how the universe operates. Everything you experience, everything you see, hear, touch, taste, and smell is information being processed by consciousness. What you call physical reality is actually a consensual construction created by the interaction of consciousness with the quantum field of infinite possibility. Think of it like this. Reality is like a vast virtual reality simulation, and consciousness is both the hardware that runs the simulation and the user who experiences it. Your thoughts are like the code you're constantly writing. Your emotions are the energy that executes the code. And your beliefs are the operating system that determines what's possible within your version of the simulation. But here's where it gets really interesting. The simulation is responsive. It adjusts itself based on your expectations, your beliefs, and your emotional state. If you expect limitation, the simulation will generate experiences of limitation. If you expect abundance, the simulation will generate experiences of abundance. If you expect miracles, the simulation will find ways to deliver miraculous experiences. This is why the education system teaches you to expect so little. If you believe you're powerless, you'll create experiences of powerlessness. If you believe you're separate from everything else, you'll experience separation. If you believe consciousness is just brain chemistry, you'll limit yourself to what biological brains can supposedly do. But if you understand that your consciousness itself, temporarily focused through a human nervous system, exploring its own infinite creative potential through the game of physical existence, then everything changes. The universe isn't happening to you. You're happening as the universe. You're not in reality. Reality is in you. You're not experiencing consciousness. You are consciousness experiencing itself as you. This understanding transforms everything. Instead of being a victim of circumstances, you become the creator of circumstances. Instead of reacting to reality, you realize you're the one generating reality through your moment-to-moment choices about what to focus on, what to believe, and how to feel. But this raises an obvious question. If we're all conscious creators, why is there so much suffering, limitation, and dysfunction in the world? The answer is that most people are creating unconsciously. They're generating reality based on programming they received in childhood, beliefs they inherited from their culture, and emotional patterns they developed in response to past experiences. They're creating from patterns of fear, scarcity, and separation that were installed in them by a society that doesn't understand the true nature of consciousness. It's like having the most powerful computer in the universe, but running it with software that was designed to keep you limited, fearful, and dependent on external authorities. The universal law works perfectly, all the time, for everyone. But if you don't understand how it works, if you're not conscious of what you're creating, if you're running on limiting programming, then you'll use this infinite creative power to generate experiences of limitation. This is why knowledge isn't enough. Information isn't enough. You need to actually reprogram yourself at the deepest levels to identify and transform the beliefs, emotions, and thought patterns that are creating experiences you don't want. Now let me show you exactly how this works and how you can begin to use it consciously. Reality operates on multiple levels simultaneously, like an incredibly sophisticated computer system with different operating layers. Understanding these layers is crucial for learning how to work with the universal law effectively. At the quantum level, everything exists in what physicists call superposition, a state where all possibilities exist simultaneously until consciousness collapses them into specific experiences. Your awareness literally selects which possibilities become your reality from the infinite field of potential. Think of it like standing in front of an infinite buffet where every possible experience exists simultaneously. Your attention is like a plate that you fill with specific experiences. Whatever you focus on, whatever you give your attention to, gets transferred from the realm of possibility into your actual experience. This is why ancient traditions emphasized the importance of controlling your thoughts. They weren't being moralistic. They were being practical. Your thoughts are literally the mechanism through which you select your reality from the field of infinite possibility. But thoughts alone aren't enough. You need emotional energy to activate them. Emotions are the power source that transforms possibility into manifestation. This is why wishful thinking doesn't work. There's no emotional charge behind it, no energy to fuel the creative process. The ancient Egyptians understood this principle deeply. They practiced what they called creating with the heart, using intense emotional states to charge their intentions with creative power. They knew that emotion is energy in motion, and that this energy is what actually moves things from the quantum field into physical manifestation. Here's how it works. When you have a thought while experiencing intense emotion, you create what I call a morphic charge, a pattern in the consciousness field that begins to attract corresponding experiences. The stronger the emotion, the more powerful the charge. The more often you repeat the pattern, the stronger it becomes. But there's a deeper level that most people miss. Your beliefs act like filters, determining what you allow into your experience. You can think positive thoughts and feel good emotions all you want, but if your deep beliefs contradict what you're trying to create, your beliefs will win every time. Let me give you a concrete example. Let's say you want to manifest financial abundance. You visualize having money. You feel grateful for prosperity. You repeat affirmations about wealth. But deep down, you believe that money is the root of evil, that rich people are greedy, that you don't deserve abundance, or that spiritual people shouldn't want material things. These conflicting beliefs create what I call creative interference. It's like trying to tune into a radio station while someone else is broadcasting static on the same frequency. Your conscious intentions get scrambled by unconscious programming. This is why belief work is so crucial. You have to identify and transform the limiting beliefs that were programmed into you by family, school, media, and society. Many of these beliefs were installed before you were old enough to question them, and they're still running in the background of your consciousness like invisible software. Your beliefs about reality determine what's possible in your experience. If you believe that healing requires external intervention, you'll limit your body's natural healing abilities. If you believe that success requires struggle and sacrifice, you'll create experiences of struggle and sacrifice. If you believe that love is scarce, you'll experience scarcity in relationships. But beliefs can be changed. They're not permanent features of your consciousness. They're just persistent thought patterns that you've repeated so often they feel like truth. The key is to first become aware of your beliefs. Most people never examine their beliefs consciously. They inherited them from their parents, absorbed them from their culture, or developed them based on limited experiences. And then they spend their entire lives creating reality based on these unexamined assumptions. Start by looking at the results in your life. Your external circumstances are a perfect mirror of your internal beliefs. If you're experiencing lack, look for beliefs about scarcity. If you're experiencing conflict, look for beliefs about separation. If you're experiencing relationship problems, examine your beliefs about love, trust, and intimacy. The process of belief transformation involves 3 steps: identification, questioning, and replacement. First, identify the belief by asking yourself, what would I have to believe to be true for this experience to make sense? Be brutally honest. Don't look for beliefs that sound spiritual or positive. Look for the beliefs that actually match your results. Second, question the belief. Ask yourself, is this absolutely true? Where did this belief come from? What evidence do I have that supports it? What evidence contradicts it? How does holding this belief serve me? How does it limit me? Most limiting beliefs crumble under genuine inquiry because they're based on incomplete information, childhood misunderstandings, or cultural programming that was never meant to serve your highest good. Third, replace the limiting belief with an empowering one. But here's the crucial part. You have to feel the new belief, not just think it. Emotional conviction is what makes beliefs powerful. This is where most people fail. They try to change their beliefs with their minds, but beliefs are held in the emotional body. You have to feel your way into new beliefs, not think your way into them. Use visualization, but make it visceral. Don't just see yourself experiencing what you want. Feel it in your body. Generate the emotions you would feel if your desired reality were already true. The universe responds to vibrational signatures, not mental concepts. Practice this daily. Spend time each day generating the thoughts, feelings, and beliefs that match your desired reality. This isn't positive thinking. This is reality programming. But there's another level that goes even deeper than beliefs: your identity. Your identity is your deepest conception of who you are, and it acts as the ultimate filter for what's possible in your experience. If you identify as a victim, you'll create experiences that confirm your victimhood. If you identify as limited, you'll experience limitation. If you identify as separate from the creative power of the universe, you'll feel powerless. But if you begin to identify as consciousness itself, as a divine being having a human experience, as a co-creator with the universe, then you begin to access abilities and possibilities that seemed impossible from your previous identity. This shift in identity is what spiritual traditions have always been pointing toward. They weren't trying to get you to believe in external deities or follow moral rules. They were trying to help you remember who you really are. Now let me show you how to apply these principles to transform specific areas of your life. Your body is not a mechanical system that operates independently of consciousness. It's a crystallization of consciousness, a physical expression of your beliefs, emotions, and thoughts about yourself. Every cell in your body is constantly listening to your internal dialogue. When you tell yourself you're getting old, your cells respond by aging faster. When you tell yourself you're sick, your immune system responds by becoming less effective. When you tell yourself you're healing, your body activates healing mechanisms that modern science is only beginning to understand. This isn't wishful thinking. This is documented science. The placebo effect demonstrates that belief alone can trigger healing responses that are identical to those produced by active medications. In some cases, placebo treatments have proven more effective than actual drugs. But the medical establishment treats the placebo effect as an inconvenience, something to control for in studies, rather than something to understand and harness. They don't want you to know that your belief in healing is often more powerful than their interventions. The nocebo effect, the opposite of placebo, shows how negative beliefs about health can literally create illness. When patients are told they have a terminal diagnosis with a specific timeline, many die right on schedule, not from the disease, but from the belief that death is inevitable. Dr. Bruce Lipton, a cellular biologist, has shown that genes don't control biology. Consciousness controls gene expression. Your beliefs about your health literally turn genes on and off, determining which proteins are produced and how your cells function. This means that genetic predispositions aren't fixed destinies. They're potentials that are activated or deactivated based on your consciousness. You can have genes for cancer, diabetes, or heart disease without ever expressing those conditions if your consciousness doesn't activate them. To work with your body consciously, start by changing your internal dialogue. Instead of focusing on symptoms, focus on health. Instead of identifying with diseases, identify with wholeness. Use visualization, but make it anatomically accurate. See your immune system working perfectly, your organs functioning optimally, your cells regenerating with perfect intelligence. Feel gratitude for your body's incredible capacity for healing and renewal. Address the emotional roots of physical conditions. Most chronic illnesses have emotional components: unexpressed anger, unprocessed grief, persistent fear, or deep-seated beliefs about unworthiness. Healing these emotional patterns often resolves physical symptoms that medical treatment couldn't touch. Money is energy, and like all energy, it flows according to consciousness. Your relationship with money is a perfect reflection of your relationship with your own creative power. If you believe money is scarce, you'll experience scarcity. If you believe money is evil, you'll unconsciously repel it. If you believe you don't deserve abundance, you'll sabotage your own financial success. But if you understand that money is simply a symbol of value exchange, a tool for creative expression, and a way to serve others while serving yourself, then you can allow it to flow into your life naturally. The key is to shift from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset. Scarcity consciousness focuses on what's lacking, what you can't afford, what you don't have. Abundance consciousness focuses on the infinite creative potential of the universe and your role as a channel for that creativity. Start by appreciating what you already have. Gratitude is the fastest way to shift your vibrational relationship with abundance. When you feel genuinely grateful for your current blessings, you align with the frequency of receiving more. Focus on giving value rather than getting money. Money flows to those who serve others' needs and desires. Ask yourself, how can I contribute more value to other people's lives? The universe rewards value creation with financial abundance. Release attachments to specific outcomes. When you're desperate for money, you create energetic resistance that blocks its flow. Trust that the universe will provide what you need in ways you might not expect. Examine your beliefs about wealthy people. If you judge rich people as greedy or corrupt, you're creating unconscious barriers to your own wealth. Remember that many wealthy individuals use their resources to serve others and create positive change in the world. Practice feeling wealthy before you have money. Generate the emotions of abundance, security, and generosity. The universe responds to your vibrational state, not your bank account balance. All relationships are mirrors, reflecting back to you your beliefs about yourself, your worthiness of love, and your capacity for connection. If you're experiencing conflict in relationships, you're seeing reflections of internal conflicts. If you're experiencing rejection, you're seeing reflections of self-rejection. If you're experiencing loneliness, you're seeing reflections of disconnection from your own heart. The most important relationship you have is with yourself. Everything else is an extension of that primary relationship. You cannot give what you don't have, and you cannot receive what you don't believe you deserve. Start by healing your relationship with yourself. Practice self-compassion, self-acceptance, and self-love. Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you care about deeply. Release the need to change or fix other people. Everyone is on their own journey of awakening, and trying to control their process only creates resistance and conflict. Focus on your own transformation and watch how others respond to your increased authenticity and presence. Communicate from your heart rather than your ego. The ego communicates to protect, defend, and control. The heart communicates to understand, connect, and love. When you speak from your heart, you invite others to respond from theirs. Practice forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because carrying resentment hurts you more than it hurts them. Forgiveness doesn't mean condoning harmful behavior. It means releasing the emotional charge that keeps you stuck in victim consciousness. Your purpose isn't something you find outside yourself. It's something you remember from within. You came into this life with unique gifts, perspectives, and contributions that only you can make. Your purpose is intimately connected to what brings you joy, what you naturally excel at, and what problems you feel called to solve. It's found at the intersection of your passions, your talents, and the world's needs. But purpose isn't just about career or external achievement. Your deeper purpose is to awaken to your true nature as consciousness, to heal the wounds of separation, and to serve the evolution of human awareness. Every interaction you have, every choice you make, every moment of presence you offer contributes to this larger purpose. You don't have to change the world dramatically. You just have to change yourself authentically. Trust your intuition about what feels right for you. Your inner guidance system is constantly pointing you toward experiences that will serve your highest growth and greatest contribution. Don't wait for permission from external authorities to pursue your purpose. The world needs what you have to offer, and you don't need credentials or approval to begin sharing your gifts. As you begin to understand and apply these principles, you may encounter resistance, both from within yourself and from the world around you. This resistance is natural and predictable, and understanding why it occurs will help you navigate it successfully. Internal resistance comes from the parts of your psyche that have been conditioned to believe in limitation. These aspects of yourself feel threatened when you begin to explore your unlimited potential, because they've built their identity around being small, safe, and controllable. Your ego mind will generate all kinds of arguments against this material. This is too good to be true. If this really worked, everyone would be doing it. You're being unrealistic. This is just wishful thinking. You need to be more practical. Recognize these thoughts as expressions of conditioned fear, not truth. The ego's job is to keep you safe within familiar parameters, and expanding beyond those parameters feels dangerous to it. External resistance comes from people in your life who are invested in your remaining limited. When you begin to change, you disrupt the familiar dynamics of your relationships, and some people will unconsciously try to pull you back to your former level of functioning. Family members might criticize you for being unrealistic or selfish. Friends might mock your new interests or try to engage you in the same limiting conversations you're trying to transcend. Colleagues might resist your increased confidence or creativity. This isn't because they want to harm you. It's because your growth challenges their own beliefs about what's possible. When you demonstrate that transformation is real, you hold up a mirror that shows them their own potential, and this can be uncomfortable for people who aren't ready to change. The broader social system will also resist your awakening. Advertising will try to convince you that happiness comes from external purchases. News media will try to keep you focused on fear and conflict. Educational and medical institutions will try to maintain your dependence on external authorities. Political systems depend on people believing they're powerless victims who need government solutions. Economic systems depend on people believing in scarcity and competition. Religious systems often depend on people believing that divine power exists outside themselves. As you awaken to your true nature as a conscious creator, you become less controllable, less predictable, and less dependent on these systems. This is why there's often subtle discouragement of spiritual development, consciousness research, and personal empowerment. But remember, resistance is actually a sign that you're on the right track. If your growth threatened nothing, there would be no resistance to it. The fact that these ideas challenge existing power structures is evidence of their transformative potential. Use resistance as fuel for your commitment to truth. Every time someone tells you that you can't change, that consciousness doesn't matter, that you're just a biological machine, let it remind you of why this work is so important. Knowledge without application is worthless. Understanding these principles intellectually won't transform your life. You have to live them, embody them, and integrate them into your daily experience. This integration happens gradually, through consistent practice and moment-by-moment choices to align with your highest understanding rather than your conditioned patterns. Start each day by connecting with your true identity as consciousness. Spend time in meditation, contemplation, or prayer, whatever helps you remember that you're not just a separate individual struggling to survive, but infinite awareness exploring itself through human experience. Throughout the day, notice your thoughts and emotions without judgment. Ask yourself, what am I creating right now with my consciousness? Are these thoughts and feelings aligned with what I want to experience? When you catch yourself thinking limiting thoughts or feeling contracted emotions, gently redirect your attention toward what you prefer to create. This isn't about forcing positivity. It's about consciously choosing where to focus your creative attention. Practice seeing everyone you encounter as consciousness expressing itself through different forms. This doesn't mean ignoring harmful behavior or failing to set appropriate boundaries. It means recognizing the divine nature of every being, even when their actions don't reflect that divinity. When challenges arise, ask yourself, what is this experience teaching me? How is this serving my growth? What would love do in this situation? Every challenge is an opportunity to practice conscious creation rather than unconscious reaction. Create daily practices that support your expanded awareness. This might include meditation, journaling, visualization, energy work, conscious breathing, or time in nature. These practices help you maintain your connection to your true nature amid the distractions of ordinary life. Surround yourself with people who support your growth and evolution. This doesn't mean avoiding everyone who doesn't share your understanding, but it does mean cultivating relationships with people who encourage your highest potential rather than enabling your limitations. Study and learn continuously. Read books, watch videos, attend workshops, and engage with teachers who can help deepen your understanding of consciousness and its creative power. But remember that all external teachers are pointing you back to the teacher within. Serve others from your authentic gifts and inspired action. As you awaken to your true nature, you'll naturally want to contribute to the awakening of others. Share what you've learned, but do it through example and inspiration rather than preaching or convincing. Be patient with the process. Consciousness evolution happens gradually through accumulated moments of choosing love over fear, truth over illusion, creation over reaction. Don't expect overnight transformation, but trust that every conscious choice is moving you toward greater freedom and fulfillment. What you're learning isn't just about your personal transformation. It's part of a larger evolutionary shift that's happening to human consciousness itself. We're living through what many researchers call a consciousness revolution, a fundamental transformation in how humans understand themselves and their relationship to reality. This shift is as significant as the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution, but it's happening in the realm of awareness rather than technology. Ancient prophecies from cultures around the world spoke of this time as a period of great awakening, when humans would remember their true nature and step into their role as conscious co-creators of reality. The Hopi spoke of the great purification. The Maya described the end of one age and the beginning of another, and the Vedic traditions predicted the dawn of a new golden age. Modern scientists are documenting measurable changes in human consciousness. Studies show that more people than ever are reporting mystical experiences, psychic phenomena, and expanded states of awareness. Research on meditation shows that regular practice literally changes brain structure in ways that support higher consciousness. The internet has created unprecedented opportunities for consciousness-expanding information to spread rapidly around the world. Ancient wisdom that was once available only to initiates in mystery schools is now accessible to anyone with an internet connection. At the same time, global challenges are forcing humanity to question fundamental assumptions about how we live, work, and relate to each other and the planet. The old paradigm of separation, competition, and control is proving inadequate to address complex problems like climate change, social inequality, and collective mental health. More and more people are recognizing that external solutions alone cannot solve these problems, that we need an inner transformation of consciousness to create sustainable outer change. This is why the suppression of consciousness research is ultimately futile. The evolution of awareness is not something that can be stopped by institutional resistance. It's an organic process driven by the universe's impulse toward greater complexity, beauty, and consciousness. You're part of this evolutionary wave. Your personal awakening contributes to the collective awakening of humanity. Every moment you choose consciousness over conditioning, every time you act from love rather than fear, every instance you remember your true nature, you're helping to birth a new paradigm of human potential. This isn't a burden or responsibility. It's an incredible privilege. You're alive during one of the most extraordinary periods in human history, when the species is taking its next evolutionary leap. Your individual transformation is both a gift to yourself and a contribution to the greatest story ever told, the awakening of consciousness to itself through human experience. So where do you go from here? How do you take this understanding and begin applying it to transform your life and contribute to the larger awakening? First, make a commitment to truth over comfort. The path of conscious evolution isn't always easy. It requires you to question everything you've been taught, face parts of yourself you've avoided, and take responsibility for creating your entire experience of life. But the rewards are beyond anything you can imagine from your current perspective. You'll discover abilities you didn't know you had, experience states of consciousness that reveal the miraculous nature of existence, and find a sense of purpose and fulfillment that makes every challenge worthwhile. Start where you are, with what you have. You don't need special circumstances, perfect conditions, or external permission to begin this journey. You just need willingness to explore your own consciousness and experiment with these principles in your daily life. Choose one area of your life where you want to see change and begin applying these principles consistently. Whether it's your health, relationships, finances, or sense of purpose, commit to working with your consciousness as the primary tool for transformation. Document your experiences. Keep a journal of your experiments with conscious creation, noting what works, what doesn't, and what you learn along the way. This will help you track your progress and refine your understanding. Connect with others who are on similar journeys. While this work is ultimately individual, having support and community makes the path much more enjoyable and sustainable. Look for local groups, online communities, or teachers who resonate with your authentic path. Share what you learn, but do it through example rather than evangelism. The most powerful way to wake people up is to live as an awakened person yourself. Your transformation will naturally inspire others to explore their own potential. Remember that this is not a destination, but a journey. There's no final state of enlightenment where all your problems disappear and life becomes perfect. Instead, there's an ongoing process of deepening awareness, expanding love, and expressing your unique gifts in service to the whole. Trust the intelligence that brought you to this information. Your soul knew exactly what it needed to hear, and it guided you to this moment of remembering who you really are. That same intelligence will continue to guide you as you embark on the greatest adventure possible, the discovery of your own infinite nature The universe has been waiting for you to wake up to your true power. Ancient civilizations knew it. Quantum physics has rediscovered it. And your own heart has always whispered it. You are consciousness itself, temporarily playing the role of a human being, here to explore the infinite possibilities of creation. The game of limitation is ending. The age of conscious creation is beginning. Welcome to your awakening. Welcome to your power. Welcome home. The revolution of consciousness has begun. Will you be part of it?